Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mira, Resilience and Embodiment Coach. And today on Deep Conversations Held Lightly, I'm going to be talking with Eric Klein. Eric teaches spirituality and meditation and is passionate about supporting people who are living everyday, engaged lives to bring spirituality to the present moment and to the way that they live their lives. I'm not going to talk too much about Eric because I think he's going to do a much, much better job than I can of explaining who he is and what he's about. But I'm super happy to be having this conversation with him and with you all today. So, welcome, Eric. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Mira. I'm glad to be here.
So I was thinking, you know, what you and I have talked in our chats prior to this, and spirituality is such a loaded word and loaded
Mm,
term. And I was wondering if before we even go there, I think it's really good to get to know a person. Could
mm,
you tell us a little bit about how you came to be where you are? And you can start anywhere. You can
okay.
start in childhood. You can, give us
Mhm.
the things that you think are important that have shaped who you are as a human today, talking with us.
Beautiful. Okay. I think I will go back um, to childhood. One of the things that shaped me was that I never met my biological father, and that sort of narrative, which wasn't conscious but was alive in me since I can remember um, recurrent dreams that I had as a 4, 5 year old. I dreamt recurrently about wandering in the lobby of a synagogue, knowing that my real father was the rabbi walking the hall, the corridors of the inner sanctum, and I would always wake up very confused because my adopted father, and I didn't understand who's my real father. So I do think that was a shaping factor uh,
Mm.
in my soul's narrative as well as in my personal history narrative. And the and in like many people when they're young have spiritual openings of different kinds, and I had that with the ocean and with nature and with flowers and with art as well, because I grew up in New York City and had access to, we lived right 2 blocks from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So my mother would take me there when I was real little, and I would go, it was free back then, and wander the halls on rainy days. So culture, art, missing the father figure, and a girlfriend when I was like 14 gave me Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, and it just captured my imagination. This speaking of yoga and the things he was pointing to felt so powerful for me that that's when I started like looking for literature around the spiritual life. There wasn't as much then, but that was the framing.
So you talked about children and spiritual experiences. So it sounds like even for you at a young age, there was some sense of connection. You talked about art and nature. How did that how was that seeded in you? How did you become conscious of that, aware of that at such a young age? How was it present in
Mm-hmm.
your life? How was spirituality present back then?
It's funny. It was a very secular, very sort of modernist Jewish family in New York City. So it was anomalous in a certain way with what was going on, consciously at least. But both parents were very artistic and sensitive to. But this is the thing I learned. Here's an interesting thing I learned just the last year. So many, many years later, I'm about to be 69 years old. I was contacted by my half siblings, my unknown half siblings through 23andMe, the genetic coding site, right? And it turns out my biological father uh, was an early adopter of TM, Course in
Ah,
Miracles. He was a vegan before there was a word called that, and he was a deep practitioner of these things and a deep seeker. So, clearly there was that code.
so hang
That
on,
was
Eric.
a
When did this happen? This that your siblings got in touch? This is just recent in your life.
Yeah, this was in the last year.
And you found this out about your dad.
Yeah. And I thought that was so confirming, in a beautiful way of something that I've been, you know, basically on the committed to since I was, consciously practicing since I was 16 years old. So it was interesting. And that was around the time he was getting interested in it too, which was also very synchronistic, right?
Wow. So what's this been like? I mean, this is huge. You talked about
Yeah.
the narrative of your life, having never met your biological father, and now it's
Yeah.
60. So you're 68 now, or you were 68 when you found out?
Yeah. 68 when I found
At
out. Yeah.
68 years old, you
Hmm.
get introduced to who he is and
Yeah.
to siblings. Did you know you had those siblings prior, or was
No,
this?
I did not.
Wow. So
Yeah.
can you kind of
I
tell
got
us
off
about
the
that moment?
telephone.
Yeah. How did this
Sure.
happen?
It was cool. I got contacted by a first cousin through 23andMe, said that I have a brother who's a professor at UC Berkeley, and he had tried to reach me apparently through another site. And I said, I never got the email. She said, would you like to be in touch? And I said, absolutely, it'd be great. She goes, well, here's his email. It's on, so you can feel comfortable at your own whatever. And I wrote the email with the subject line, "Oh brother, where art thou?" and sent him the note. And he wrote back within an hour. It's like, best subject line ever, And we have a great hysterical relationship, right?
Ah.
And he told me about my father Stanley and his path and stuff, and introduced me to the rest of the family. And it's been, I've done a lot of work, and in our spiritual tradition of Kriya Yoga, there's a lot of work that we do on what we call healing family karma. So I've done a lot of work in that space, and this was like more like continuing that investigation, right? And more about, well, in terms of like, I had a dream shortly after that of kind of semi-lucid dream of diving deep into, I was in a photography room, a dark room. I was in the dark room and I dove into the development solution, right? And it went all the way down, and I could see this glowing piece of paper deep at the bottom, and I was
Mm.
swimming through and going down to it and turned it over, and there was a picture of Stanley and all these siblings, and the awareness in the dream was like, and I was in the picture, we've been together all along. And it was a very healing felt sense and confirmatory felt sense of this, you know this connection that's always been there, but
Mm.
hadn't been able to be fully played out in,
Mm.
the everyday life, but had been such a strong, uh, congruent sort of current that has been guiding me or whatever, or I've been flowing with since, birth.
And the confirmation of that through the shared interests when you found out who he was must have just been
That
really,
was stunning. That was
yeah.
very, very, very supportive and very, very, it felt like an added like yes to the trajectory that I've been on.
So let's examine another part of the
Yeah.
story and the trajectory. So
Mm,
how did this narrative of having never met your biological father back in your youth, okay,
sure.
play out in terms of bringing you deeper towards a spiritual
Yeah.
quest or a spiritual slash, I'm going to put in here in parentheses, psychological
Yeah,
investigation of yourself and
totally.
the world?
Well, I'll be a little didactic and then I'll go into my personal. So it was one of the frameworks that, well, C.G. Jung made the statement that at the heart of every complex, okay, so you could say at the heart of every unconscious pattern and habit, he said, is a God, but he meant there's an archetype. So you could say, if we translate it into everyday language, it's sort of like, in the midst of all our emotional dynamics, there's some deep soulful medicine and energy that's trying to be connected with. Okay. And it's like your soul's giving you that medicine, but you're not getting it to it mostly because of all the noise. So
Mm,
with that in mind, the father, searching for the father as the symbol of the archetype of wisdom and generativity and
mhm,
leadership, all of these kind of factors were like core fascinations, even obsessions for me. I was wanted to find that father, that
mm,
like in yoga, the witness energy, the wisdom energy, the generative energy. And I happened to like glom onto this spiritual pathway as a way of doing that. Um,
okay.
and I mean, it didn't take a lot of psychological sophistication to realize, since I met my teacher when I was like 18. I didn't know it right away, I'll say that. But in my 20s, it sort of dawned on me, he is a father substitute. Okay. I just want to acknowledge that and not have it become a problem or something that I need to even wrestle with, just to know it and
Mm.
let it evolve. Let it evolve. Yeah.
So let's go to that moment then. You're 18 years old and you begin. It sounds like this, from what I'm hearing and you saying, that was the beginning of what's continued to be your spiritual path for a very long time. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about this. Who was this substitute father figure?
Yeah,
What was the
sure.
tradition that you were meeting?
Yeah.
What drew you there? What was going on in your life at that moment?
Okay. So when I was 17, first to back up a little bit, I went to my first yoga class in New York City. And so at the end of class, Shavasana, and I had this, just this classical opening, and I sat up and I was just like in a deep state of meditation, just sitting there, sitting there, sitting there. And, everyone cleared out. And finally, I, I went into the dressing room and I spoke to this gentleman who was also changing. And I was like, do you realize what we have here? I was very like a 17
Yeah,
enthusiast.
the passion of the 17-year-old that's
And
just
like
discovered it
sort
for
of
the
the
first time, right? No one else
totally,
knows this.
nobody else knows this. And he was like, relax. uh but that like was, yes, okay, I must find my teacher. Because before class I would sit in the anteroom, the chamber before you got to class, and reading. They had Ram Dass's book at the time; it just come out, and he's like, my guru, my guru. I'm like, I gotta find my guru. And I did go and do a few forays into that search, and happily, for whatever good karma I have of either being a New York cynic or having my Jewish, sort of intellectual background, I would like go, this is BS, because there was a lot of
Mm,
hypnotic talk and glassy eyes and stuff like that. So I was, but I went to Boulder, Colorado. I didn't go to college. One of two people in my preppy school. I went to Boulder, Colorado, and I met a student who was a student of mine who became ultimately my teacher, Goswami Kriyananda, who was an American. And this guy said, you should visit him. And I went to Chicago and to visit. And I was just really watching very carefully. And I went in to talk to him. First of all, it was a small, very intimate scene. And I went in to talk to him in his office, and he looked at me and he goes, you need to go out and earn the soybean bacon, man. You are spacey. Okay. And I'm like, I just want God consciousness, and he's like, okay. So there was something really so grounded and real and direct and human. Yeah. And his name, he was an American by birth, had been initiated into this lineage of Yogananda, and his disciple, who was also an American, named Shelley Trimmer, who then initiated this gentleman named Goswami Kriyananda. And I went back to Boulder, but I know this is where I'm coming back to Chicago. And I met my wife in Boulder. We weren't married then, but we moved to Chicago to study together.
okay, so I mean, you and I know each other a little bit. We met through
Mm,
business coaching
yeah.
program, and we've had a bit of a chat. And you did go out and build a very successful business earning this soybean bacon. So let's talk about this. So you was that when you were back in Boulder and you were married when this business started? Or
No,
had you
moved
moved again?
to Chicago to study with Kriyananda and tried a lot of things, entrepreneurial things, and most of them flamed out in different ways. But it was always trying to cobble together sort of this. I want to do something,
Mm.
and I would say I was making a half-hearted effort, honestly, at the earning part. I was mostly focused on learning from Kriyananda, so that was my deepest commitment. And then that reached a point where reality steps in, and we had a son, and it's like the structure is such. And I happened to my business partner at the time introduced me to the emerging, very new work of neurolinguistic programming and the tradition of Milton Erickson's hypnotherapy. And it really struck a chord for me. I went to a workshop on my Saturn return. I was 29 years old birthday, and they offered me a job doing their marketing, and I thought, great. So I could live in the workshop basically for 2 years. And that gave me this understanding of sort of the workshop business, the training business, how to communicate spiritual ideas in a way to almost anybody, and so we left the Midwest, came to California, and I got a job at a corporation doing leadership development. And that was my real graduate school before I started my own business after 2 years to do it
Mm.
myself. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. So it's so fascinating when you talk to people in this field, in the area of coaching, spirituality, et cetera, fill in the dots, all the different blends of things. But you had Kriya Yoga. So you had been studying with your teacher from the age of 18, seriously. And then now you're in the thick of an NLP organization, training organization. So how were you, and you were saying that taught you to translate and communicate spiritual concepts to just about anybody. So is that how you saw NLP? Like, how did you encounter NLP as a modality and a methodology coming from years in this spiritual
Sure.
grounding already?
Well, my partner said to me, he introduced it to me this way. He goes, I just read this book and I think it will help you because you always want to say you want to teach this tradition, but you don't want to just do it in like night school at yoga. That time, where could you teach yoga? He goes, this is a translating machine. And I said, that sounds perfect. And later up, jumping ahead, I kind of think that's my basic dharma, is to be a translating machine anyway. So and this was when NLP was not like yet sort of in the public domain of personal development. All the clients, all the people were psychiatrists, psychologists, and clinicians of some sort. So that was the space, and a bit of business consulting.
Okay, so it was also the beginning of that idea of really consciously and deliberately applying psychology in the world of business as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought maybe I would become a clinician, but when I looked at the idea of going to graduate school versus being an entrepreneur or whatever, I like, seems like a more direct way. I'm just going to go straight into it. So for my personality, I thought it would be a much better fit. Yeah. And
go on, sorry.
Yeah. And NLP was like, NLP was originally called the structure of subjective experience. It was about structure of experience and how can you work with the basic structure in order to help people have the inner and outer results or experiences that they're seeking, right? So it's not, and it got, while I was there, you could see the writing on the wall where it was, in my mind, going into kind of was losing the value structure of help and moving more into control and world domination kinds of fantasies.
I won't go too far down that path because I want to stay focused on your kind of trajectory. So you had taken the technology though at this point. So you've been 2 years with them and then marketing role. Now you take another job for another training organization, you said, or a consulting firm?
it was a large, it was actually a Fortune 100 corporation, and they were starting a division in San
Mm,
Diego, building these electronic components for jets, and they were starting a leadership development department. And so I met the woman who was heading it up, was and looking to hire two people, and she heard about my background. Actually, that was, she goes, I am fascinated by meditation. If you can do a train, if you know how to do training, I'm going to hire you just because you have that background. So I had a sort of trial, I had to do a little trial run to do a
yeah.
class, and that was that. So I
And so,
learned everything there because all these people that I was working with were engineers, ex-military people, and
mm,
just very, very, straight, conventional people who wanted to be able to be effective. And that was where the translating
mm,
chops had to really come to play.
mm. And so you had your NLP background, you had your spiritual background, and then we were talking just before we started recording that you've also been influenced by the work of integral theory and Ken Wilber, and that
Yeah,
you came across those teachings when those teachings were very early, when he was just beginning to really share his
yeah,
ideas. So how did that come about, and where did that fit into the work that you then began to do with this company and into the future?
sure. Well, I just want to give a bow to Ken Wilber, who is one of the great geniuses of our time, for being able to do what he, to integrate this integral philosophy, to bring together so many streams of human intelligence and human creativity. What Wilber, in terms of its practical application to my work in organizations, is basically he gave a rubric where you could show what every sage has always said, which is that your outer condition is a complete mirror of your inner condition. But
Mm,
he did it in such a way that I could present it to CEOs and other C-suite officers when they were struggling with their organizations, and they would self-diagnose. Oh, it's me, and
mm,
it's our culture, which are inner things, that is creating all of this struggle in the outer.
mm,
And that then gave me permission to say, let's work on the actual hard part then. The easy part is reorganizing externally,
mm,
just like the easy part is to move your house or get a new partner. The hard part is to work with the patterns of mind and heart that constrain you from making the choices that will actually produce the new world that you want to live in.
mm. So tell us a bit more about that then, Eric. As you were blending these, as you were training, as you were on the ground working with real people. So from what I remember of our conversations, that job transitioned into you being a consultant, and you kept your
Yeah,
consulting business going for a long time. So you were continuing to do that work. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Yeah. So tell us about it. Like what did you feel like you were doing during that time in the hearts, minds, and souls of people working as standard as householder life, in this case, corporate life,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
in the material world?
sure.
How did you help them? What have been the processes that you've taught people, guided them through? What's really the essence and core of what you believe it's all about?
Mm, sort of. Okay, a lot of this was done pre-mindfulness. It's important to say that was not a word that was having any currency when I was creating this work. We talked about what we called values, gifts, and legacy. That all of us are animated by deep, I would say now soul, but deep core values, energies that are so universal, but they're the ones that sing through us. That we all are coded to have very unique gifts, which are both the way we perceive and also the way we offer our gifts, our service. And there's something legacy or calling, there's something that's calling us that we want to create in the world. Okay, and so we would work with leaders and teams to figure out individually and collectively what are our values, what are our gifts, and what is it that we're called to really do in the context of our situation.
Mm.
And that's really important because that's true whether we're talking about a family or an organization or an individual. We're in a context, and that's the place to awaken and connect to our values, animate and cultivate our gifts, and follow that call. So that was the work. And it was, and I called it when I first did it for a very engineering computer science corporation. And I said, and this is called your Dharma. And they were like, they just all these engineers were going, we want our Dharma. We want our Dharma. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. Because all it meant to them was the experience that we had just explored, right? Of course they wanted that. It didn't have like spiritual, religious, or cultural overtones for them. It was like just a placeholder to point to that experience. We all want that,
So how did it become what it is now? So you were, how long were you in the corporate world? So I mean, I'm a little bit distracted, I have to admit, thinking about that moment that you've just described, of what that must have been like, the energy in the room and people, thinking about people getting to that place. Here's what I understand, I'm kind of filling in the gaps and guessing that something in the way you were talking about legacy and gifts, and what was the other aspect?
Values, gifts, and legacy.
Values, gifts, and legacy was connecting people to an experience of what it means to feel alive, really, and in alignment. We've got so much language in the popular modern culture now for this, right? Like you were saying, there wasn't even mindfulness. Now we're like, okay, I was feeling very aligned, and I was feeling very empowered, and all these things have become second nature to us to speak about. So you had actually, through the delivery of those materials, through the experiences and the integral theory and the different parts you'd blended together, offered people an experience of, this is what it's like to live that. Is that right? So they got that. So then you did that for how long, Eric? You were experiencing
almost 30 years, just shy of 30 years.
Okay, almost 30 years. So what happened? Why do we now have a different business called Wisdom Heart that is different from that? So tell me about what's brought you.
I think for me, that's a really perceptive question, because it was I got tired of the context, to be perfectly straightforward. We were doing profound work, and as the culture caught up or whatever, as the culture matured, where what I was doing could become less covert in a way, and where the most important part was originally had been left out, which was cultivating the meditative mind. That, because that's what I couldn't find, is probably a better way to say, the way to introduce practice. It was more like a workshop experience, right? But what I know is that unless you do the practice, the impact of the workshop is going to evaporate once you leave the room, essentially. Okay, so now eventually practice became at least something that could be mentioned in terms of mindfulness. And it's still quite the rare person who chooses and commits to practice. Many people taste it now, but not everybody makes it a regular part of their nutrition, right? Of their diet. Fine, that's good. But what I realized was, after a while, that's what I want to work with the people who do basically want to make that central to the conversation. And I want to also be even though everything is a metaphor, we're always translating and expressing these ineffable realities through language. I want to be able to include, for my own sense of congruence, more of the language of the tradition and more of the sacred language that doesn't always have a place in every conversation. And that's fine for those conversations.
Mm. So you've left the context of corporate world, the sense that there are people there that are getting a taste but not necessarily ready or ripe yet to really bring it into an ongoing experience in their life. And then, I mean, it's interesting that you talk about wanting to step into using more sacred language, and the fact that NLP, which is such a language oriented modality, was part of it as well. So what are you now doing with people? And maybe I can be a bit cheeky and say, can you express it in your old way? Like, what is
Sure.
your business about now, or your teaching about in terms of your values, gift and legacy?
Yeah, for sure.
And then if you want to say it in sacred language, that as well.
Okay, that's beautiful. What a nice exercise. Let me see how I can do. Okay, the values of values of creativity, values of clarity, and values of it's a value of depth. I guess that's what I'll say. Okay. And the gifts that I bring in that context are one is the ability to flex metaphors in ways that can engage different perspectives and different levels of understanding. Another gift is, which is associated with it, is humor. To be, because humor has to do with taking like a little bit of a meta view at what we're doing and enjoying the cosmic absurdity of it and the beauty of it too. And I think one of the other gifts, I always had them do three, so that's why I'm following this, is I guess is it a gift? It kind of is a gift. Is my my library deep knowledge of all these different traditions and psychologies and practices and stuff like that. And the call is to live more and more congruently, more and more completely in what I call the radiance, and to awaken that experience and to enable that experience in others so that they can live that same way with the people that they love and care about.
Beautiful. And did we start to just
I think we
sort of sacred language? Yeah.
We sort of sneaked over there. Yeah. It would be like, let me do the call is to, I can't even go there. I'm not going to go back.
That's good. So tell us now, practically speaking as well, what does it look like? What do the services of Wisdom Heart look like? What are you doing with people when you have clients and groups? I know you do both, I believe. So talk us through what's going on these days.
We have a number of, so we have courses that we offer around things like healing family karma. So it's like applying practice to the kinds of things that we've been talking about, actually. And then we have a program called What's Calling You, which actually is like the corporate program now at a whole deeper level. What's really calling my soul? It doesn't, in this life that I'm living, right? And in all the contexts, we teach how to cultivate a meditation habit. And so we have many courses. forgiveness course. These are coming to me now. The course on the Bhagavad Gita. We have courses that look at what we call astrology for awakening, which is really using the language of astrology as a doorway into archetypal understanding of your life experience. So we have many programs, and people can take those as, student, like consumers, like, check it out kind of thing. For people who really enjoy it, we have the Wisdom Heart community. And that's like business-wise, it's a membership. And almost everything that we do is just included. A few things with like small group special things aren't, but everything else is included in the membership. And I work with a few people individually as well.
So you're essentially in those programs, you're teaching people meditation practices and supporting them. Is that through guided exercises in journaling? Is that through group discussion? Like, how does somebody get involved? What do they do? And what are they getting at the end of a program or a course with you?
Right. Okay. Well, each program will have its own outcomes, so to, its own deliverables. But it will always include the application of meditative awareness to, the particular area of focus. So if it's forgiveness, first of all, there'll be the promise that you'll learn a methodology that will allow you to experience forgiveness of self and others in conflicts and in memories of pain and whatever, and unresolved narratives. And the class will be learning that practice and engaging in that practice. And Eric and Devi will be there to help sort of troubleshoot and reflect and support you through what arises as you engage, because that's one of the great graces of spiritual practices, that whatever is unredeemed in our awareness will arise as we practice in order to be redeemed and integrated. And, it's also one of the reasons why why they stop practicing, because they don't have the support usually or the context, or both, for relating to what arises as they move into the deeper levels of their psyche.
Well, I was just going to say that sounds to me, that's what the community's about then, right? So you're offering this container of, you're going to do practices which, yes, will bring you closer to your gifts. Yes, will help you, take your legacy. Yes, will help you feel more connected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And is going to bring you face to face in perhaps more intensity with the wounded parts of yourself, with the difficult challenges that you've got going on. That's the point where a lot of people want to run away. A lot of people say it's not working, I'm still a mess, or, and you've got that community there to go, hang on, this is beautiful, rich material. We're going to use it, and we're going to show you how to use it and support you while you do that for your own growth, transformation, etc. You don't have to run away. We've got you.
Exactly. And it's so, it's so important to have some form of community, whatever is form, and that kind of a lone wolf personality. I didn't think I had one for a long time until I looked back, with some more maturity, and realized, first of all, there was Devi and I going through, from 19 years old, all these years of doing that. And then there was our close circle of friends. There was Kriyananda while he was alive, and sort of the students around him. So there's always been community. It's impossible to do it on your own, actually. And, and the internet is such an amazing resource in terms of what's available for free, and every tradition, and there are no secrets. It's all out there, at the touch of a Google search. But that can be a bit of an illusion, because without the container, it's just either you'll kind of explode into areas that just destabilize the system, or you'll just sort of circle around in
And
the
not really go anywhere.
comfortable
Yeah.
domain. Yeah.
Beautifully said. So I know because we've been working together in George's group, George Cow,
Hmm.
beautiful business coach for anyone that's watching, that you've been making content and sharing content about all this stuff so people can get to know you, get a feel for you, get to know your ideas. So where would be the best place for someone who wants to get to know a little bit more about you and Devi and Wisdom Heart and what you guys are
Hmm.
doing in a, online?
Sure. So the website is wisdomheart.com. The Instagram is wisdom.heart. And Facebook Wisdom Heart I think just Wisdom Heart. Yeah. And in YouTube, it's called Wisdom Heart TV. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So before we wrap, it's been beautiful to chat with you today, Eric, as I knew it would. And really, I didn't know that about your father and the whole kind of thread of that, and how that brought you to a teacher. So as we kind of come to close and just settle a bit together and wind up the conversation, is there anything that, out of all of what you've learned and all of what you share and all of what you teach, I know this might be a tricky question, but
Mm.
that you would want to say to people to keep in mind who are starting to look for or journey on a spiritual path?
Beautiful. I would say pay less attention to fame and more attention to your heart. Yeah. Not to say that famous teachers are problematic or not real or anything. Just to know that the part of us that moves towards the shiny object isn't always the most trustworthy in terms of taking us to what we deeply, deeply are called to realize.
Beautiful. Hence Wisdom Heart.
Hey, there we
The
go.
wisdom of the heart. Well, it's been really beautiful to chat with you today, Eric. I'm delighted. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it and your heartfelt sharing today.
Thank you, Mira, so much.
Mm.